is when you're building out a website, you may deliver it, it's super fast. Over weeks and months, your clients start loading more and more images. They start finding plugins to add. They may have another developer that adds something down the line. Now suddenly they come back to you and your 3-second website is loading in 12 seconds. And they're like, well, how could this happen? Why is our site so slow?
Growing a business requires a holistic approach that extends beyond sales and marketing. This approach needs alignment among people, processes, and technologies. So if you're a business owner, operations, or finance leader looking to learn growth strategies from your peers and competitors, you're tuned into the right podcast. Welcome to the WBS Podcast, where scalable growth using business systems is our number one priority. Now, here is your host, Sam Gupta.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the WBS Podcast. I'm Sam Gupta, your host and principal consultant at digital transformation consulting firm Elevate IQ. For every 1 second it takes for your website to load, your conversion rate goes down by 10%. But how true is that? Well, speed is a huge factor in ranking on Google. In fact, even if you have mastered the desktop speed, you might still not rank well if your mobile speed might not be as good. But what are the issues that cause a site to load slower? Are these issues related to hosting provider, site design, number and size of the imagery, or bloated themes? What do you need to do to fix these speed issues? Are there any tools out there that could help diagnose and fix the issues? In today's episode, we invited a panel of cross-functional experts for a live interview on LinkedIn who brings significant expertise to discuss visitor page speed optimization strategies for e-commerce. We discussed the factors that may cause the sites to slow down and as a result might perform poorly on Google. Finally, we covered the strategies and tools that might be helpful in fixing issues related to site speed. With that, let's get to the conversation. Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's show. For today, we are going to be discussing page speed. And that topic may sound very technical. It is going to have impact on your revenue because if you don't have the speed on your site, our friend at Google are not going to be happy. So you need to fix that. Before we do that, we are going to start with everybody's intros. Eric, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Eric Landman. I'm the e-commerce division manager of Earthling Interactive. I'm a professional e-commerce developer. I've built out about 50 plus sites, many of them multi-domain, multi-brand, bunch of different platforms. I'm a Magento certified solution specialist, but I've also worked with Shopify and BigCommerce. So this is a cool topic for me today. Looking forward to it.
Okay, amazing. It's always exciting to have you, Eric. Thank you so much for being here. Okay, Steve, can I ask you to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you, and a pleasure to be here with all of these wonderful guests. My name is Steve Rice. I am the president and co-founder of both .com Jungle and the Globally Conscious Leader. And we spend a lot of time at .com Jungle helping companies make and implement wise technology choices, and that includes selection and implementation of websites and how they integrate with ERPs and other integrations with shipping tools and stuff like that. So we help them make those decisions and implement them better.
Okay, amazing. It's always fun to work with you and have you on the panel. Thank you so much for being here, Steve. All right, Chris, can I ask you to introduce next?
Absolutely. Thank you, Sam. Great to be here with all of you. I am Chris Harrington, the president of Gen Alpha Technologies. We are a digital commerce provider to manufacturers and distributors, and we essentially help them with the parts ordering and whole goods ordering process online. So as a developer, certainly we have faced speed issues over the years. I think that's just something that we all have to face and understand and just continue to enhance and get better at. So great topic today. Thank you, Sam.
Could not agree more. Thank you so much for being here, Christina. Now, I'm actually going to move to Robert. Robert, would you like to introduce yourself? First time here.
Hi, Sam. Thanks for having me. My name is Robert Brown. I'm the principal of Robert Brown e-commerce consultancy. I come with a background of enterprise level e-commerce and am now focusing on small to medium-sized businesses, helping typically private multi-channel e-commerce companies improve their operations and integration into new systems to help them be more efficient.
Okay, amazing. And I am always blown away by your insights. So thank you so much for being here, Robert.
Thank you.
Brent, can I ask you to introduce yourself next?
Sure. My name is Brent Peterson. I'm the president and co-founder of Wagento. We are a Adobe partner. We were a Magento partner before they were purchased, and we're a BigCommerce partner. And this is a relevant topic in as the Magento community is excited and thrilled about some new concept and theming that's coming around page speed and the impacts of page speed on your sites. This is a perfect time.
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much for being here for the first time, you as well, Brent. This is going to be so exciting. All right, so we are going to dig into the topic. And the first thing that we are going to do is we are going to look at all of the factors that typically drive any of the speed issues that we are going to see for the site performance. So, Eric, I am actually going to start with you. I don't know if you are going to have the laundry list of the issues that you want to cover, or you might have a bunch of stories that you want to talk about. So go for it, brother.
Well, sure. It's a big topic. Not too long ago, Google released to the wild what they call their Core Web Vitals update, which is a ranking system that Google uses to rate sites, and page speed is a huge part of it. There are different aspects to page speed, one of which is the actual server response. Another is what's called layout shift. So you've probably gone to a page and things kind of jump around. Google has decided they don't like that. Another is the page weight, the number of requests that are made to the server. So they factor all of these things in when they index your site, and they use that to inform their search results. So if your site has a bad page rank, it is going to drop down in the ratings, all things considered. Used to be the focus was only on content, but now they've shifted that focus and put a huge emphasis on these more technical aspects of how the site responds. So that's what this topic is about. It's a very large topic. There's lots of things that could be adjusted and tweaked and modified, and there's ways to improve it, quite a lot of ways usually. There's also ways to screw it up and make it worse. So we should talk about that in the future.
Yeah, very interesting insights there. In fact, I mean, see, Google is changing it a lot, and I am pretty sure you guys are going to cover the other factors that are fairly recent. So, what I have been hearing in the community, even though, let's say, your site was okay 5 months back, but it might not be okay today, because now they are also considering how you are going to perform on mobile. So, even if you are loading okay on web, if you are not loading well on mobile, Google is going to kill all of your traffic. Okay, you are going to lose the ranking. I don't know if you guys have seen the similar issue. Eric, you have any follow-up comments there by any chance?
I do, yeah. We've been running page speed analyses on our client sites, and the actual page speed is a tool.
Yeah.
Well, one of many tools, I should explain that, provided by Google. So you can actually sort of look at this and go, what's going on here? What are they using as a diagnostic, or what are they griping about? What do we need to fix? In the results, there are two major categories. There's a desktop result, and then there's a mobile result. They can be wildly different, and in fact, usually are. We have some sites, we've got some page speed ranks up in the 80s, which is pretty good, 80 out of 100. On the other hand, before optimization, the mobiles were down in the 20s, which is like way out in the boondocks. So that clearly needs to be addressed. So the reason for that is a person's mobile experience is different from desktop experience. You've got a lot less real estate. You've got things that might be on the screen that are really, you may be using the same images for the desktop version of a site versus compared to the mobile version of a site. When you don't need that, you might be sending a much too large image, and it's taking way too long to download because mobile devices are on a lot slower networks usually. And so you're going to get dinged for that kind of thing. So when we do an analysis, that's kind of problems that we look for and resolve.
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much, Eric, for that. So, Steve, I'm actually going to move to you. So, I know that you had a long list of the factors that typically drive the speed. So, I don't know if you're going to be covering the list or you have some stories that you want to share related to the factors that really affect the speed.
I'll share a list, and I'll also start off by saying, when we talk about how Google's changed its algorithm, what we're actually saying is that people have told Google to change the algorithm through their actions, right? Yeah. And so, if you're a CFO or CEO or you care deeply about your website, all Google is saying to you is this is how people respond on the web to these things. Google knows how fast your site loads. They know how quickly people bail out when it takes 4 seconds. That's all their rules are. They're not something imposed by the great evil giant upon us. They're actually just telling us what actually works, right? So with that said, there's about 10 things. You could go 12 or 15, but I picked out 10 things that I think are sort of the most common things we run into that cause slow page loads. And one of them, Eric already talked about, big images. You can have poorly implemented JavaScript. JavaScript is the language that sort of does activities on the website and is super interactive. And if it's written poorly, it can really blow up your website. Even the CSS, which is what makes the page look the way it is and can be the cause of what Eric was talking about with the shifting, that can be poorly written. Too many requests to the server. And you could have one CSS file, you could have 50,000 CSS files. And 50,000 CSS files means you're hitting this 50,000 times. Yep. I'm using a hyperbolic example, but obviously poorly written code anywhere along the way is not going to be good. And most sites all sites should be using gzip compression to deliver files across the web from the server to the browsers. All browsers currently open gzip really fast. Having a bad host is super common, especially I don't know. CFOs seem to say, well, the $9 host is the same as the $99 host, and they're just not. And Brent and Eric know this for sure. If you're a Magento person and you don't go to a service provider that is a Magento specific server company, you will not get a fast page. It doesn't, because they don't know what to do. They don't know what Varnish is. They don't know Turpentine. They don't know these other tools that are used on the server that work really well with Magento. And then the CMS itself can be slow. WordPress is one of those that gets listed in the top 10 for high speeds. Yet I consistently, and I'm sure everybody here sees WordPress websites that are really slow because the number 10 thing on the list is too many plugins or slow plugins for a CMS. So you can have a great speedy CMS and then add a bunch of stuff to it that maybe you don't need. And all of a sudden you're loading at 5, 6, 7 seconds on a page. So that's my laundry list.
Okay, amazing. Great list. And by the way, if Dave Meyer were here, I mean, see, obviously he's the SEO expert. One of the things that he is going to say is Google is trying to tell you be as usable as possible. And that's what they are doing. And there are no shortcuts to it, whether you talk about the speed or you talk about the speed. Thank you so much, Steve, for that. So, Chris, I'm actually going to move to you for the factors that you have. I don't know if you're going to have any additional factors that you have seen, or if you want to share any specific stories related to factors that really drives your site speed.
Yeah, I think that, I came up with 4 that have really impacted us, because I think sometimes if you can go away with a small list that you can actually work on, it could be very valuable. And images and the compression and sizing of images is something that is tedious for companies that aren't on a solution that's automatically doing that for you. So what we find with companies that want to re-platform with us, one of their complaints is the speed of their site. And as they're on an older site and they think that they need to upgrade to a new platform because of some of their issues, but they're not working with a provider that's helping them understand the issues that they're facing or using some of the tools that we're going to discuss here today. So images are certainly, it really is a very large one, and it's probably going to come up for many people. So it's a tedious exercise that can have a tremendous benefit. And there are some, again, if you're not working with a solution that automatically sizes and compresses your images for you, there are some free tools available on the internet that you could use, and if you search for them, you're gonna find those. Not using affecting caching policies. So in our world, we do a lot of integration with the ERP, right? So it's really important that we identify truly where we need to have real-time calls to the ERP system versus some caching, done on the site so that information comes back up quickly. So it's really important for companies to identify where truly do they need a real-time call with their integration, or where can they insert caching. And caching really is basically remembering when a user loads a site, it remembers logos, it remembers some of the different features on that site so that the page loads faster. Now, there's a balance with that, right? Because you have to balance caching with ensuring accuracy of the information. So those of us who are developers realize we have to balance what we cache against what's really important to make sure that we're presenting accurate information. Large content responses. So I mentioned this before, and other times that we've come together, we work with manufacturers who have a very large number of SKUs. So categorization and attribution is relatively new for them because they didn't have to categorize or attribute their products in the past. So what happens is when they launch a site, the first time they've categorized their products or put attributes on their products, they may not have narrowed the list to reduce the friction, make it easy, and ensure a fast loading time on the page. So there's a lot of benefits to thinking about content. I'm just using that one as a story because we see that frequently with our customers who have a lot of parts that they're trying to categorize and make sure that they're creating this frictionless experience for their customers. And then Steve mentioned it, server response time. So as we've moved from domestic to international, we've used co-locating services to make sure that we're closer to the farthest user of the site. So you want to make sure that you're working with a company that is hosting with the right providers, and that they are certainly doing what's needed for your site and that hosting isn't the issue. So those are 4 that come up frequently as we have either made changes or we advance in our own development, or we start working with new clients and new territories. Those are some things that come to mind there, Sam.
Very interesting. So in your case, I mean, when you actually had told me the number of SKUs that you have in your space, and I believe you had mentioned 3.7 billion or million?
Billion.
Okay, billion.
We have a single customer with over 3 million SKUs, yes.
Even then, 3.7 million SKUs is a big deal. Okay, now let's talk about when you are, and I don't know how you guys are rendering these images. I mean, your product is one of the most complex that I personally have seen in these. Okay, so I don't know whether you guys try to aggregate all of these images to render the equipment, because that could mean you are probably aggregating 10,000 images together to be able to render your product. Do you guys do any specific things there?
Well, the architecture of our application is designed so that we don't face those challenges. So because we know our customers have a lot of SKUs, as part of the design of our architecture and how we keep building and enhancing our site, and really in coaching our customers with how they do things as well, we have to design to make sure that those challenges don't occur, Sam. So like on some pages, we'll have the first image will load, but an action will need to be taken before a next image comes up. That ensures that there's a faster response time and speed on the site for that first image, and the customer takes an action to get to the second image, and then it would load. So there are ways, there's lazy loading and there's above the fold designs. I'm not extremely technical. My technical team understands these things a lot better, but we've had to incorporate these into our design to make sure we're performing at an acceptable level. And by the way, everything I read, and of course we're going to talk about these diagnostic tools, but 3 seconds or less is kind of what we're aiming for, right? Yeah. So, that's kind of our benchmark. We're always trying to ensure that we're 3 seconds or less. Of course, the faster, the better. And that's going to lead to greater conversions. So we always have to keep our eye on the ball of what is the goal. And that's certainly the target for us.
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much, Chris. So, Robert, I'm actually going to move to you. Obviously, you have worked on, 4 bigger sites in my experience. And then I don't know if 3-second response time that Chris mentioned, I don't know if that is going to be cool in your industries. So, in your experience, what has been the factors? And I don't know if you're going to have any additional factors, but I would guess that your factors are going to be far bigger just because of the size of the sites. Do you want to
Right.
talk about this? Yeah.
So, one of my customers was doing 4 million a day in sales, and so every minute that a site was down, they're losing a lot of money.
Yep.
And so they made sure that they worked with the best providers. And I think Chris was talking, a couple of the people were talking about, make sure that you have a good hosting provider.
Yep.
I've had clients that try to skimp on hosting providers, and so they went with a co-hosted server as opposed to their own. And you get some guy that's spamming or has a virus on their section of the server, and it will bring the whole thing down. So you're wondering why your site went down. It's not because of your site, it's because somebody else is doing something they shouldn't be doing. I know some customers decide, look, I'm going to try to do this inexpensively, so I want to go with the inexpensive host, and I'm not going to get the, say, virus software to make sure that my site doesn't get hacked, which can slow it down. Some other things that I've seen is, with my bigger clients, they typically get scraped. So scraping is when other companies will take and grab your information, and they will actually walk through your site on a regular basis to try to pull all of your information and replicate that someplace else. And those are all calls that I think Steve was talking about, tons and tons of calls back to your server because they're actually going through your site at a high speed to pull this information as quickly as possible. And that will cause your site to slow down, if not shut down the server. You can actually see that, and your technical support team or your provider can take a look at your logs and see, oh, I can see that this company has been scraping me, or these IP addresses have been scraping me. You can block them and stop them from doing that. Really good scrapers will just continue to roll over, so you can actually put software in front that will stop that from happening. Those are some of the big things. I mean, if it's an ongoing problem, what the guys have been talking about, looking at the size of your code, looking at your JavaScript, looking at your images, that absolutely will help. But if it's something that suddenly happens, then you're talking about a different diagnostic activity. You have to look at, okay, is it something that was released last night by the dev team? Can they roll that back to the previous version and try to figure out, what happened in that release? Is it some of the hardware? So one of my clients had all of their own hardware. They had the best hardware you could get. So they had an F5 load balancer against 4 IBM 4x4 boxes because it had handled a lot of traffic. And a couple of the ports on the F5 went bad. So a customer called in and said, hey, your site's down. And we looked at it and said, no, it's not. Well, the F5 was load balancing between these 4 servers. Yeah. And so every single call would go in and go to a different server, right? Yeah. So one server's up, the next server's up, one's down, the next one's up. And so it took us a while to actually dig in and figure out, oh, the load balancer went down. So then we had to close that port, so only 3 servers are running until we could get a new load balancer in.
Okay, so amazing insight there. I especially like the example that you mentioned about the scraping, and I don't know if you are going to have any specific strategies, especially for the customers who might not be as technology savvy. For example, let's say if you have a manufacturer that is probably running either Shopify or Magento, have you seen any specific tools or strategies that they might be able to use to avoid the scrapping? Because I can see the issue because of that, and they are going to get penalized. They might not even know that they are getting penalized because of that.
I would ask Eric and Steve, since they're more the experts on Magento than I am.
Steve, do you want to take that question?
Yeah, I think there's one thing that almost everybody can do, like almost immediately, that would have a great big effect on their page speed. And it's not right for everyone, but using a SaaS or security service caching system like Cloudflare or Security is one of the fastest ways to make something like scraping completely irrelevant, because there's different types of caching. if you're caching at the server level, you're saying to somebody, this is what my page looks like, and so I'm going to save that page for the next person. So you've got server-side caching happening, right? And then there's also content delivery networks that cache, say, your images and your files around the world. So that's another really important type of content delivery, or caching that allows your content to be served. That's one way of saying, if I'm in Virginia, I get the video from the server in Washington, D.C., and not from the server in the Philippines, right? And then there's this entire other type of cache where you're paying another company to basically scrape your website for you and then build all those web pages. And then you have to do some settings on the back end of your website. You have to change the DNS settings and stuff, which is a little technical for this conversation. But you're basically pointing people to this, call it like a magazine front for your entire website. So it's loading all of these pages. It's not even hitting your server. The people who hit your server are people, maybe a brand new web page that's never been seen yet gets pushed to your server, and then Cloudflare sees it, caches it itself, puts it all over the world. The place where this can be problematic is if you have dynamic content inside a page. You have to do these things called punch throughs. So you have to punch through the dynamic stuff, and you have to list your checkout pages, which are all dynamic, as things that don't get cached, because you don't want to cache a checkout page. But that's probably the number one simplest thing that people can do to basically eliminate a lot of issues that have to do with how fast your pages load and what effects scrapers and hackers and other people might have on your actual server that you're paying for.
Okay, love it. Thank you so much. So, Brent, I'm actually going to come to you. I don't know if you're going to have any perspective on scraping. Obviously, you are working on very complex sites as well. So if you want to talk about scraping and any other issues that we may have missed so far that affect the site performance.
Yeah, I mean, I think from the scraping standpoint, Steve has a great point that you want to do edge as much as you can. And Fastly, Cloudflare are going to push all that out to the edge. With PWA, which is Progressive Web Apps, another technology that Google is pushing right now, you can actually have your provider host that application on the edge for you. So now you're depending on some API calls, but essentially you are delivering that content as close as you can. Doesn't necessarily help your scraping, but as Steve said, most of those are going to scrape through their product pages, and as long as those product pages are 100% static, that should not affect your local server and the response times of your local servers. I think everybody's had a great point here. One thing that is often overlooked from the speed standpoint is when you're building out a website, you may deliver it, it's super fast. Over weeks and months, your clients start loading more and more images. They start finding plugins to add. They may have another developer that adds something down the line. Now suddenly they come back to you and your 3-second website is loading in 12 seconds, and they're like, well, how could this happen? Why is our site so slow? You start doing an analysis. I think Web Page Test is a great tool. Webpagetest.org is a great tool to look at your site in a film strip view to see what's loading and how big are those images and things that are loading. And oftentimes what we see is suddenly for a sale, a client has loaded 6 or 12 ginormous images in their banner carousel, and that is just killing their site because none of them they're all have to load all at once, and suddenly your 3-second homepage load time, which is the most important, is now loading in 12 seconds, and maybe some of your subsequent smaller pages are loading faster. But really, Google's looking at that homepage. And even then, if they're looking at, say, a 3G connection like they would see in a Lighthouse speed test, that 3G connection suddenly becomes unbelievably slow. And you may get a page score of, say, 10, which then further makes your site, penalizes your site for that SEO traffic.
Those are some very interesting comments.
Yeah, we got this stuff about servers and hosting and content delivery networks is absolutely valid. I guess I've been in that world so long I don't even think of people using lesser powered sites. So yay, that's good for me. But I wanted to bring the conversation back around a little more toward what Brent said. More commonly, there are a problem with code or sites, or especially themes, and I know for sure Brent has something to say about this. There are ways to structure themes to make them deliver much more efficiently. And one of the metrics that Google uses is called first contentful paint. It's kind of what it sounds like. How long does it take for you to see something Go to a web page, you're sitting and waiting. That's the first contentful pain. There are ways to actually make that appear faster. It's not just, why is it so slow? Can we get a faster server? No, it's actually code related. So there are ways to improve that, a couple different ways. And it all has to do with the themes and how the theme is structured. And there are different solutions, or maybe no solutions, depending upon the platform you are on. And there's some really cool solutions out there now that are just super turbocharged fast. I've seen some, well, in this case it's Magento with a particular theme, which delivers 1 second page speed. And you just go, what? That's crazy. How can that be? But it's actually true. So I do have 2 stories, really brief stories. We had a customer who their homepage was unbelievably bad on PageRank. We're going, what is going on here? We discovered that in the mega dropdown, he'd actually put a video in there. So every time somebody went to the homepage, it was downloading 400K of YouTube JavaScript. And we're going, oh, don't do that. That's a bad thing. So that was after we set the site up. The other thing was we noticed that their category pages were really not well. This is an outdoor gear supplier. I've talked about them before. They sell sailboards and stuff like that, wetsuits and such. They go to a category page. There might be, 150, 200 products in that category. And they used to have a theme, which would just load everything. Well, that of course is ridiculous. It takes way too long. And so we improved the speed by having it lazy load. Chris used that term. And a lazy load is kind of what it sounds like. You get loaded immediately the images that you first see, and then as you scroll down the page, you see things load. That's called a lazy load. That doesn't happen with most themes out of the box. You have to usually add extensions or do some coding to make it do that. That dramatically improved their page rank. Just that one change. So that was pretty cool.
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much, Eric.
So adding on to what Eric was talking about, how many of you remember Netscape?
Oh, yeah.
And, with Netscape, they had the brilliant idea of waiting to render until everything had loaded. And so people would literally sit there for 2 minutes for all the content to load when there was much slower speeds. And so lazy loading, Chris was talking about her client had so many SKUs. I have a client that has 20,000 SKUs, and their original site tried to load half of them at once. I'm like, what are you doing? 10,000 SKUs at once? It's like, so yeah, I love the lazy loading. And the other option for lazy loading is pagination. So you would take, say, 10 or 50 products on a page, and then you go to 2, 3, 4, and 5.
Yeah, I think one thing that clients get sucked into for lazy loading is that when you do lazy load, even pagination, they think that if you're going to load all 20,000 products, you are saving a little time because you're not loading them all at once, but you still have to go to the server for that collection, and there's a collection that has to be rendered then. So that initial load, you're going to have to grab those, and depending on that category, let's say Chris has a client with a 3 million and they want to use layered navigation to filter through 1 million products. They're still going to have to load the attributes for 1 million products. And if they think that's going to happen fast, and that's going to happen fast dynamically, they have to really think about what is it that they have behind hardware to make it happen fast. And most of the time, it is not going to happen in under 3 seconds.
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much, Brent, for that. So I think we are going to move to our next segment, which is going to be, around strategies and tools. So Steve, do you want to go next for the strategies and tools that you have seen with respect to this feed?
Yeah, and I think we can mix strategies and diagnosis together in a certain way. One of the things I wanted to point out is that when you use Google's PageSpeed tool, it's actually at pagespeed.web.dev is the URL. And you're actually testing the page speed from your current location. And a lot of people don't realize that. And everybody here probably realizes it because one of their clients went to it and said, we're really slow. We're at 8 seconds. And then you find out, well, they're sitting in a room with their 3 children who are all gaming at the same time from the same IP address. So you actually have to be careful using the page speed tool, I think, as certainly as a one-off, how fast this is going. If you could use proxies and or did use proxies and checked maybe every 10 minutes or every hour at all of those proxies and got an average, that would actually be a better way to do it. So I actually recommend people go into Google Analytics into the behavior section, because there is a site speed overview area that tells you what your average page load speeds are. That said, I and my team often disagree with the number that Google reports, because we actually run tools. What is one of them? Webpagetest.org is a great place to go for analysis, because they're using servers around the world to check the website. They're not just checking from their one little server wherever it is. And they'll give you a waterfall chart that shows you your first content full, and it tells you which things load and how fast. Like, you'll see everything. It's a little bit overwhelming, but that always comes up with a different speed than Google Analytics. What I'll say that's good about Google Analytics is it is a really good reference point historically for you to look at. Because if you go launch your website on Magento and you've been on WordPress for years, you will see a difference up or down, and it'll happen on that day. And if you have that historical stuff in Google Analytics, it's really useful. Likewise, moving forward, whether Google says it's 5 or 4 seconds, if you get it to 4 or 3, you know that you've got a 20-25% faster speed. So that's why the analytics, I think, is important. As far as fixing these things, I mentioned, the software as a service tools like Cloudflare and Security. They also give you security features that are too in-depth to list here. But every content management system, CMS, Magento, WordPress, Shopify, they all have plugins to do what's called minification of your files. They basically remove all the spaces and make them smaller. They also have image optimization tools. So they'll actually look at the image you upload and make it smaller and compress it and then serve it with, as a gzip. All those things, if you're using a good CMS, those tools will be available to you, and everybody has them. So since most people use content management systems like that, I'll just say go type in your content management system and page speed and photo optimization and see what comes up, because there's a lot of good tools out there.
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much, Steve, for that. So before I move to Chris, and I don't know if she's going to be comfortable addressing this question, Eric or Steve, do you want to address the question for Mubashir?
Sure,
Lazy Loud.
Sure, I can.
Oh, lazy.
Yeah.
Are they really popular? Well, here's the thing. If the user doesn't wind up on your site, it really doesn't matter, right? So you need to get them to your site first. And that's what we're talking about, is improving the page rank so that they even have the opportunity to get there. Because if you don't lazy load things and your site is indexed for Google and it's on page 5, well, nobody's going to wind up there. So it doesn't matter what you use think, because they're never seeing it.
Okay, amazing. So I am actually going to read up the question just for the audience so that they can at least follow along. So basically the question is saying lazy load at great difference in speed, but are they really popular for user experience point of view? Because images will not load until they scroll down. I don't know. Eric, did you actually cover the second part of the question? Steve, do you want to go?
Yeah, I think that the answer really comes back down to where your images are being loaded from and how quickly they load. Because we've all had, I'm sure, I have it all the time on my phone, where I'm scrolling down and I'm reading an article, and all of a sudden the words that I'm reading disappear because there are images that are actually loading above me. I'm reading faster than they're loading. So I think the answer to that question is make sure you have a really good server and make sure you have a really good CDN, and then that doesn't matter as much. And everything else that Eric said completely applies. His stuff applies first, and you have to do this. Because if you don't have a CDN and you have a slow server, like Eric said, you're not going to show up in the results anyway. So you got to get those done and lazy load. And then you have that user experience that actually works instead of the frustrating one. Stuff's bouncing around, trying to read it or trying to click a button.
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much, Steve. So Chris, I'm actually going to come to you. Strategies and tools.
Yeah, I'll just, before I do that, add to the comments on that topic, because, the lazy load and the pagination both, I do think it's always valuable to reevaluate your data as well. So if you have a long list that they have to scroll through and the lazy load is coming up, maybe there's a better way where you don't have to have so much scrolling or so many pages to pay the pagination through. So it's more than just the design of the site, it's also the content that you've loaded into the site and the way that it's going to load in that case. So again, this is where owners of these e-commerce sites need to really study their analytics and understand their data. Now, to tie into that, I would agree with Steve that Google Analytics is a great tool for helping us identify where we should get started, right? So, last week we talked about drop-offs. So let's tie into drop-offs. If you know that from a behavioral perspective on certain pages, you're getting drop-offs, those might be pages you might want to go use these diagnostic tests to see if there's anything happening from a speed perspective and some insights, because all of these tools provide you with some insights. So you're actually working on the pages that bring you value. Users are going there, and you also know that they're dropping out from there. So if you want to reduce the number of drop-offs, it might be a speed or a performance issue, and that could be a way to look at it. Additionally, again, because our customers have a lot of products, we like to say prioritize the products that customers are actually searching and looking at, right? So don't try to improve every area of your website, every product page, especially if many SKUs are never even being searched or looked at. So again, use your behavioral tools to understand what are your most important products, both that are converting, but also those that are being searched and not converted, because there might be a performance issue that you can correct that's going to lead to those conversions. So prioritize the things that you're going to improve the performance on and use these tools to do that. This is the work. For me, this really becomes the work of an e-commerce provider. That's where they're going to realize where they have the friction points. And if they do this work, they're going to continue to deliver a better customer experience for their customers, and they're going to notice. So those would be my comments.
So love that, Chris. I absolutely agree. Prioritize. We had a customer. We were building the insurance portals for the customers to go and take a look at their stuff. These are high net worth customers. The customer had 600 cars. And, when you go to look at your normal, like say Liberty Mutual, it shows you your 2 cars, and that's no big deal. Well, imagine showing 600 cars. How do you sort 600 cars? These people don't want to sit here and scroll forever looking for it. So trying to figure out the velocity of those products and prioritize the higher velocity products to the top of the page return, right? The search results. But I would also say making sure that you have really good search, filter, and sort, so the customer can look for it any way they want to, and it comes up in a really effective way for them, because we can't dictate their thought process, their search process. Each person is going to be a little bit different in what works for them.
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much. So obviously, we wanted to cover the strategies and tools, and this was your turn. So do you have anything else to add with respect to strategies and tools?
Well, strategy. Okay, so for tools, I think this goes back towards when you're actually working with your provider building out. I think you need to use tools like cross-browser testing. Yeah. You need to identify exactly what screens and what devices your customers, what you're targeting. You can't say, I want all screens, I want all devices. No, that really doesn't work. Yep. That's like saying you're going to support Windows 3.11. So you really have to know who your customers are and what devices that they're using. If you think about the average user, it's a multi-screen experience. I may start my day on my phone, move to my desk, get into my car if I happen to have a screen there. So my wife has a Tesla, so every once in a while when I'm waiting for her to come back from something, I'm on the screen there. Then I get to an office and I'm looking at a desktop. So as you go through the day, the user may come and ping your site on multiple screens before they complete that transaction, and they want the same experience regardless of the device that they're on. So using a tool like cross-browser testing or any of the others, you can actually validate that it is a consistent experience for them.
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much.
The other one was, I think, from a strategy perspective, the CTO or the president of the company or whoever is responsible for the technology within the company needs to have a set of KPIs that they are regularly monitoring. We've been talking about how this kind of happens. As though it almost blindsides them. But if they have a regular set of KPIs that they're looking at, or key performance indicators, key indicators of the health of their business, their website, their transactions, one of them being page speed, right? Then they can keep a pretty good handle on what's going on with their site.
Okay, could not agree more. Thank you so much. And probably you need to have that 3-second KPI that Chris was mentioning. Thank you so much once again. So, Brent, I'm actually going to come to you. Anything you have to add to the conversation, or we are covering these strategies and tools that you have seen in your experience?
Yeah, I think from a tool standpoint, as much as you can automate it as possible, it's going to be helpful. And as Robert said, the CTO is going to be looking at those items. They would like those items delivered to them on a weekly basis. And I would identify pain points. So suddenly your site jumps up to 6-second load time. Why did it jump up? And having that weekly report and even a daily report, depending how much volume is on your site, having that information in front of you to identify those things quickly will help you to alleviate any problems that you're having in that speed load times that is going to impact the ROI on your site. So from just a tool standpoint, any tools you can pick, they're going to automate it. Pingdom is a great tool if you wanted to try to automate some of those things, as well as having an uptime tool. There's all kinds of tools out there that'll help you to achieve that goal of getting those KPIs in your inbox on an automated basis without having somebody manually do it. Even the Google Lighthouse has an open API that you can easily script that you could run on a regular basis and get a score to you into a dashboard consistently. So I think from a tool standpoint and then a strategy standpoint, having those things that would allow your CTO or your CEO to have the comfort in the fact that you won't fall off the edge without anybody knowing about it.
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much, Brent.
As far as the tools, I mentioned webpagetest.org and OpenKimono. I am not an investor. I do not make any money off of this. If you want to know what's going on with a web page, immediately right now go to webpagetest.org and put that URL in there. It will tell you the first content painful. It will tell you every single item that gets loaded from that page, and it'll be like red, yellow, green, or blue. And it's if you think something's wrong with a web page or your website, you can find out really quickly that what's wrong at the micro level, and then get your developers to go work on those things.
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much, Steve.
I would tell you how we address this. First, we would run a core web vitals audit to assess the situation, and then determine which of the problems are more high value, and that's easy enough to do. Okay, then you go, okay, then what? How do we fix these things? Many of these things are going to require the involvement of a developer. It's not usually just as simple as installing a plugin. It's also not only a developer to solve the problems, because some of them may be content problems. So you may have to work with the marketing department or the product owner. But we would use the tools that we've talked about. We use Google PageSpeed, we use Web Page Test, we use Pingdom. We also use SEMrush. That's one that wasn't mentioned before. A fantastic tool. And then we build our list. Then we'd make basically a hit list of what we can knock off the quickest. And many of these things are developer tasks where we're dealing with changing JavaScript bundles or updating the theme. Themes have a tremendous impact on page speed. And maybe it's just that you have a really bloated theme that's downloading hundreds and hundreds of files. That's actually pretty common, scary common. If you use Web Page Test and look at this waterfall that Steve was mentioning, you will just see hundreds and hundreds and a humongous list of stuff that's being downloaded. And you go, well, geez, my page is pretty simple. Why is it doing that? And a lot of this stuff is coming along for the ride with the theme. So there are ways to optimize that. But this is my call to arms. You need developers involved in this. You can't just go, well, it should be faster. But somebody's got to do it. So that's where developers come in. Yeah.
I agree.
Brent's got something to say there about that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think too, just from the development standpoint, if you start testing in the beginning and load testing before you launch, you don't run into those times where you've launched a site and suddenly it's slower. So I think as you're building it, even especially on a new site, but on a rebuild or something changed, do load tests, do all kinds of testing before the site even goes live to ensure that when it does go live, it's going to meet those requirements those expectations that you have.
And Brent, I have a follow-up question for you. Do you have any tools that you utilize for the load test? I don't know if this is going to be, obviously it cannot be manual, I guess. So there are going to be some tools that you are going to be utilizing for the loads too, right?
Yeah, there's lots of tools. There's free tools that'll generate traffic from from Amazon servers. There's paid services that will do those tests for you. A lot of hosting providers have a load testing service. So I would say as a merchant, do some research, find that best tool that suits your needs. If you want to do hands-on, it's like Red 13, I think, is a tool that you can generate your own traffic from your own generated EC2 servers off of an Amazon. But there's lots of options out there for doing load tests, and I can't stress the importance of that, especially if you're expecting volume.
Yeah, and since this is such a specific information, do you want to mention the name of those providers as well that offer the service? I think that'll be helpful for the listeners. Brent?
Sure. I mean, so we're a Magento shop, so all the service providers. WebScale is a great
Okay.
hosting provider. Nexus. There's a few really good hosting providers that offer this services. And again, I'm very specific on Magento. That would do that. If you are looking at something like BigCommerce, then you'd have to go with a third party to do those load testing since it's a SaaS platform.
Okay, amazing. And if anybody else has any other example that they might be able to offer, obviously mention those. But Chris, you had a comment. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, I don't know the exact load testing tool that we use, but I know as a provider of an e-commerce application, we also do load testing before and after each new production release. So similar to what is being shared here, absolutely, it's critical, just to understand where you were before your release, where you are after, because if there's a significant change, then you can understand that, hey, you have a gap somewhere. We also do the automated lighthouse that was mentioned earlier as well. So we, on the Chrome, I can even right click, inspect, and go into Lighthouse on any URL and any page and just get my own diagnostic if I'm testing something. So Lighthouse is something that we use pre and post any release as well. So those are just some additional comments to back up what I'm hearing here from everybody else.
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much, Chris, for that. So the only thing we can take right now is going to be closing advice. We have roughly 4 minutes, so we need to accommodate 5 people. Eric, do you want to go for your closing advice first?
Yeah, sure. I would just say that you can use some of the free tools out there like Google PageSpeed or Web Page Test or Pingdom, just to get an idea of what it is that your site is doing and what Google is talking about. PageSpeed does break out that in a reasonably digestible format. So you can look at that and kind of get some idea. But then after that, you've got to figure out a plan. So then figure out what your high value targets are and start working on them.
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much for that, Eric. Steve, do you want to offer your closing advice next?
Yeah, I'm going to say that I'm going to guess with 100% confidence that there's not a CEO, a CFO, or a CMO who's going to listen to this, who's going to understand half of what we've said today. And most people don't even know this stuff exists. Get yourself technical people who can look at this stuff and translate it. It's one thing to get reported 5 seconds. And it's an important thing for you as an executive to say, what do we have to do to get to 4 seconds? Get to 4 seconds, please. But you got to have the team who can look at that stuff and get you to 4 seconds. So make sure you get the right team involved and make sure you're actually thinking about it, because 40% people will abandon a page if it takes more than 30 seconds, according to numerous studies. I mean, the numbers are off the charts what people don't do when something doesn't load.
Yeah, so I guess you are agreeing with Eric that, this stuff is hard, so you definitely need to get developers involved and treat them nicely as well. Thank you so much, Steve, for that. Chris, do you want to offer your closing advice next?
Yeah, I'm going to piggyback on what Eric and Steve have shared here, but just to say that, I found some data on more than 5 million sites, the average website takes 10.3 seconds to load fully on a desktop and 27.3 seconds to load on mobile. And we do know that speed affects conversions and it affects a bounce rate, right? So obviously there's a lot of work for a lot of people to do. They need the help. Do your impact versus effort analysis, go hit the low hanging fruit and then just keep working at it. This is a continuous process. So speed is something that you'll always be looking at. So, start now.
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much for that, Chris. Robert, I'm actually going to come to you. Your closing advice, please.
Sure. I would actually start with customer journeys. I would actually do customer interviews and actually start talking to your customers and understanding what they want, what they're doing on your site, so you understand when you talk to your developers and can explain that. So they can help you understand the technology needed to meet those customer needs. I had a client who 1/3 of all searches on their site failed and the customer bounced. The reason was the customers couldn't spell. So when they put in the search term, they couldn't find a match because they weren't spelling it correctly. So we came up with a search algorithm that would allow it to convert that into something that could match on their site and come back with a search result. But if they didn't understand what their customers were wanting, they would have just said, they just didn't know what they were doing and didn't look at the data.
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much, Robert, for that. So Brent, your closing advice, please.
Yeah, my advice is to keep testing. Always assume that something is going to change, and Google does change all the time. So always make sure that you have in your wheelhouse some sort of conversion rate optimization program that you are testing, not just your speed, but as Robert said, your UX, your UI. Keep moving, keep assuming things are changing, and keep pushing those boundaries to make it faster and faster, easier and easier, simpler and simpler.
All right, amazing, guys. So that's it for today. On that note, I really want to thank everybody for their time and insights.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you, everybody.
Sam.
See ya.
Bye.
Thank you, Sam.
Awesome.
I cannot thank our guests enough for coming on the show, for sharing their knowledge and journey. I always pick up learnings from our guests, and hopefully you learned something new today. If you want to learn more about Eric Landman, head over to earthlinginteractive.com. It's EARTHLINGINTERACTIVE.com. If you want to learn more about Chris Harrington, head over to genalpha.com. It's GENALPHA.com. If you want to learn more about Steve Rice, head over to .comjungle.com. It's DOTCOMJUNGLE.com. If you want to learn more about Brent Peterson, head over to Vegento.com. It's WAGENTO.com. If you want to learn more about Robert Brown, head over to optonline.com. It's OPTONLINE.com. Links and more information will also be available in the show notes. If anything in this podcast resonated with you and your business, you might want to check other related episodes, including the interview with Aaron Courtney and Eric Landman from Earthling Interactive, who discusses the strategies and considerations to evaluate e-commerce platforms and architecture. Also the interview with Jason Greenwood, who discusses the nuances of the click and collect process and why you need to centralize inventory and distribution strategy to enable this experience. Also, don't forget to subscribe and spread the word among folks with similar backgrounds. If you have any questions or comments about the show, please review and rate us on your favorite podcasting platform or DM me on any social channels. I'll try my best to respond personally and make sure you get help. Thank you, and I hope to catch you on the next episode of the WBS Podcast.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the WBS Podcast. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform so you never miss an episode. For more information on growth strategies for SMBs using ERP and digital transformation, check out our community at WBS.rocks. We'll see you next time.